All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon, and in this video, we're going to talk about the welterweight division and Kell Brook after having beat AMIR Khan, what he had to say about Errol Spence and Terence Crawford. Let's talk about that in this video. All right, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fanon. We're going to talk about the welterweight division in this video. Had a really good fight, although it extremely long in the tooth as far as waiting for the fight to take place between Kell Brook and AMIR Khan. And during that whole thing, after the fight, Kell Brook was asked about a lot of questions about what he's going to do next, a lot of this and that and coming up, but he also gave some insight into other issues in the welterweight division, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Before I get into that, though, thank you so much to everybody that continues to support the channel. Thank you for subscribing to the channel. If you are not subscribed to the channel, please make sure that you do subscribe, hit the bell icon and select all notifications so that you can be notified of whenever we release videos. And also make sure to support our betting partner, BUSR, at busr.ag/Fanon. Whenever there's sporting events that you gamble on, there's a lot of props up there, and you will definitely get different benefits for using the promotional code. So make sure you guys do that if and when you're wagering. So let's get into the 147-pound division and what Kell Brook had to say after his win with AMIR Khan. People were asking Kell Brook what he's going to do as far as his career is, moving forward in his career. There's talk about him fighting Conor Benn next. There's also, conversations about Chris Eubank trying to fight him, right? A bunch of UK fights could be set up for Kell Brook. Kell Brook himself, though, I don't know what he's going to do. However, if he does do something, it is going to be below the world-class level. And so I wouldn't expect, to see any major, type of fights coming up for him. But he was asked what he thought about the fight between Errol Spence Jr. and Terence Crawford and who he believes are the best welterweights in the world. And I thought what he said was pretty telling. I'm not bitter about what he had to say, or let me put it this way. I don't think that he's bitter in when he was saying this. However, he says that he thinks after the Sean Porter fight and how that played out for Errol Spence Jr. and how the Sean Porter fight played out for Terence Crawford, that he says that he believes that Terence Crawford will win the fight between that Errol Spence would lose to Terence Crawford now. But the funny thing to me is, though, that when I watched the fight that took place last night, it actually made me even more confident in my prediction that Errol Spence Jr. will win that fight, because I think that the two fights have a lot in common. First of all, more than likely when the fight takes place, it's going to be a fight that everybody was looking for several years, right? And you have one guy that many people that is coming up from a smaller weight class fighting a guy that is a legitimate, long-standing 147-pounder. In the case of AMIR Khan, it's AMIR Khan moving up from lightweight, going over to the United States, getting a really big name, all of that stuff, and getting mentioned at certain points in time as being on the pound-for-pound list and such. And you had Kell Brook, who was at 147 pounds, became a world champion at 147 pounds, but is a much more and was an underdog in a lot of people's cards to Kell Brook, right? So the parallel for me is that you have a guy that is supposed to be the more skillful fighter in AMIR Khan move up and fight the more basic fighter, Kell Brook, and after having waited for that fight a long time, you wind up seeing that Terence Crawford Kell Brook is able to pretty much just walk down and hunt AMIR Khan and then get AMIR Khan out of there. the parallel to me with the is similar to the Errol Spence Jr. Terrence Crawford layout for me, because you have a smaller guy that a lot of people are saying are a more skilled fighter, but you have a bigger guy that is seriously fundamentally sound, not as much flash to him or whatever, but he's the bigger guy, and he's somebody that has a consistent attack. And I think that fight could go and be very, very similar to what you saw with AMIR Khan and Kell Brook, where it's a lead up to a fight, and the bigger guy, the more just solid, fundamentally sound fighter, winds up winning the fight. And that's the reason why during all of these conversations between Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence, I've always thought that Errol Spence Jr. had the advantage, because Errol relies a lot less on athleticism than Terrence Crawford does. Terrence Crawford is similar to AMIR Khan in that regard, and probably only that regard, is that he relies heavily on his athleticism, on his foot speed, his ability to react, right? And if you listen to like if you listen to like what Tim Bradley was saying when he predicted AMIR Khan to beat Kell Brook for this fight, he said pretty much the same thing he says. It's like the hand speed, the rapid hand speed, the big power punching, that he figured would be able to overcome, the more basic, the more plodding Kell Brook. And I think that his prediction is similar for Terrence Crawford and Errol Spence Jr. So, it's just going to be interesting. But the big similarity between the fight, obviously, is the amount of time that people are waiting to see the fight, how much people anticipate the fight taking place. I was heavily anticipating and hoping that AMIR Khan Kell Brook fight would get made. I didn't talk about it a lot in the interim, like in the makeup of it, because at that point with that fight, I got to be the same way a lot of people are about the Errol Spence Jr. Terrence Crawford fight. I'm like, man, I'm gonna believe it when I see it, when they actually when they actually walk in the ring. But when they actually walked in the ring, it's a lot of excitement, man. And it wasn't a bad look for AMIR Khan to lose the fight. It wasn't some, and I don't really think that, other than what happens after the fight, that it makes much difference that the fight happened later or it happened earlier. Both of those guys, they had their trials and tribulations. These guys all had lost. They both had lost multiple times before the fight was actually made. But still, when they got in the ring with each other, you could tell that they were both giving their effort. And I think that fight probably would have turned out that way no matter what time those guys fought. Similar to Floyd Mayweather Jr. and Manny Pacquiao, right? It's just it didn't happen when it was supposed to happen, but they both aged at the same rate. Neither one of them had significant decline or significant improvement in the time that we waited to watch them fight. And it wound up being the fight that it would have always been. Floyd was going to beat Manny Pacquiao. Kell Brook was going to always beat AMIR Khan. And in this instance, I think that Errol Spence Jr., though a lot less flashy than Terrence Crawford, is going to be Terrence Crawford, but in a much more close and tactical fight than you got, with Khan and Brook, because, obviously Terrence Crawford does not have as big a problem with that jaw as AMIR Khan does. However, that issue is still there for Terrence Crawford. But anyway, that's my take on the matter. You let me know what you think in the comment section. And with that, I'm out. Peace.